Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. If you're new to my channel, I have these live streams regularly, talk about the latest updates, and of course, later on, open the space up for the community for participation and some questions as well. Tonight, we have a couple of things to talk about, really, to try and understand what's happening and connect the dots and gain an understanding for what's coming ahead. Number one, the escalation coming from Israel in Gaza, more massacres against the innocent civilians. Likewise, in Lebanon, more statements coming from top figures in Israel saying that the IDF have no clue what on earth they're doing in Gaza. They have no strategy against Hamas. But we also just had very important developments in Yemen with the genocide coalition led by the United States attacking Yemen, this time a civilian quarter. And so far, there were 9 civilian martyrs. And the numbers are due to rise, by the way, with at least 9 wounded. We're going to go through the statement of Donald Trump, what he said exactly, and what Yemen responded, and where things are going exactly with Yemen, because there's also a message for Iran from Trump and his administration. However, we're going to begin with Gaza, Beit Lahia, this time, North Gaza. People were preparing to have an iftar meal for Ramadan, and all of a sudden, a strike kills 9 of them, including children and 3 journalists and aid workers, only for trying to record this feast they were having in North Gaza. Israel, from its side, they said, well, they wanted to launch a drone, and in one other case, they said also people were trying to also plant bombs. They happened to be, well, aid workers, journalists, and children. Israel killed in the past 48 hours 19 people in the Gaza Strip. So it's not like we're not talking about an event on its own. We are talking about a deliberate attack coming from Israel here against the civilians as part of their genocide campaign, as a continuation to the genocide campaign that they're conducting in Gaza. It was clear that none of these people were a risk to Israel. It was clear that, well, it was civilians, yet they still decided to go ahead and launch these attacks. Again, with no condemnation, of course, neither from the biggest supporter of the United States, of Israel, the United States, nor from any other European country. Hardly any European country said anything. It's as if nothing happens. You know, Israel can slaughter children like that, these people. It's as if they're meaningless. It's as if they're not human or not worthy of the human rights that they constantly preach to us about. You know, just people die in Gaza, you know, and some people say, oh, they died. All of a sudden, explosion kills people. Who caused the explosion? Why? How many? How old were they? What were their names? They don't mention anything of the sort. And on the other hand, now they're applying pressure on the Palestinian side to accept this facade of a trick deal so that Israel can get away with more slaughter without accepting anything. A big problem. Then it wasn't only... it was not only in Gaza, it was also in Lebanon. You see, Israel is starting to escalate even more inside the Lebanese territories. Today, they carried out another attack in Lebanon, killing 2 people. And it seems like they're feeling at liberty in Lebanon to kill. Of course, from the Lebanese side, the Lebanese resistance, well, primarily Hezbollah, they declared that they are still abiding by the ceasefire. They are not retaliating to Israeli breaches and killings, and there have been many in the past few months. According to Hezbollah, they are giving the state time to deal with this. And Israel, on the other hand, is continuing. They are having these religious, they call them the religious visits to Lebanon, And there were more invasions in certain areas in Lebanon today with the support of some Israeli tanks. But the actual attack was this attack here. So we can have it in English as well for you guys. And according to the public emergency operations, they said an Israeli airstrike targeted a place in the town of Burj al-Muluk. They said here a Lebanese citizen was killed. Another report said 2. Now, of course, from an Israeli side, they always say that they target people who are, wanted, without further elaboration. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, they did carry out an attack. It was a Hamas member in Lebanon, and they did kill him. That assassination that Benjamin Netanyahu had to approve during his court hearing, again, and an excuse to run away from the court. It's not as if anyone was preparing anything at that time, because we have ceasefire. Clearly, Israel and its allies, they want to portray it in everyone's mind that they are entitled to breach everything alongside the United States and anyone who backs Israel. Any European country that backs them, they are entitled to breach, they are entitled to kill, they are entitled to commit acts of violence and terror and murder of innocent children. But the other side does not have a right to retaliate by demonizing their legitimate resistance or armed forces trying to protect them, or by doing anything, or even speaking up. Speaking up is a crime nowadays. In the United States, they are deporting and kidnapping people who are critical of this genocidal entity. So it's quite problematic. Things are getting more tense. Now, Hezbollah are saying that we're giving the Lebanese state time, but the Lebanese state, they will realize at one point that that's it, it's not going to work. They'll realize these people, there is no talking with them. And the only language they understand is the language of force. However, no decision has been made yet from the Lebanese resistance to start taking action against Israel. From the statements that we're hearing, that time could come at some point. The state, so far, they're having these talks. According to multiple reports in Lebanon, the state is still conducting multiple talks with the United States, the French, and some other mediators to try and force Israel to withdraw from its positions in South Lebanon. Israel is still occupying 5 positions in South Lebanon. They were supposed to withdraw completely from Lebanon by the end of January. There was a small delay. They were granted more time, 18 days to be more accurate, to withdraw. Then they still said, well, we don't want to withdraw. They're doing kind of similar stuff that they're doing with Syria too. And we want to stay here. These places are important for us, and we want to secure the settlements in North Israel. However, there is no progress. There is no progress on the ground to show that Israel will be withdrawing from these areas in South Lebanon. Looks like they're there to remain and have fun up until we reach a stage where there are actual attacks. With regards to Israel, well, they've been celebrating one of their holidays, the Purim holiday, and they commit massacres on this holiday. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest massacres that were committed by Israel was the Cave of the Patriarch, or Al-Masjid al-Ibrahim in Arabic, in Hebron, Al-Khalil, when a Zionist settler went and massacred dozens of people and wounded hundreds when they were praying. He committed that in the Purim holiday, their religious holiday, and now they're committing these massacres during this holiday. It's as if they're doing it as a ritual. Some of their other holidays that include, lighting fire, they were firing tents inside of Gaza with people burning inside them. It's as if they do these things deliberately and celebrate them from a religious side too. And this was one example. This guy was from Gaza, and he is actually reading things from the Talmud, and they're shooting. Here's the video.
לעשות כן, ותאמר אסתר, איש צר ואויב. אמר!
Again, hardly anyone shows these things, as if they're irrelevant. Someone just reading verses from the Talmud and shooting in the Israeli army. It's not that important, is it? Especially when they're shooting at civilians aimlessly, and then they're conducting massacres inside of Gaza today just because, their excuse was people were actually trying to launch a drone to take photos of some people having iftar in Ramadan. As if nothing is happening. Which leads us to another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Yitzhak Brik, we've been speaking about this man. He's a retired major general in Israel. He had some interesting statements. This man has been very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu, and he constantly is in touch with the people who serve in Gaza, by the way, and he constantly debunks the general narrative of Israel and of Benjamin Netanyahu and his excuses to go to the war and his whole campaign inside of the Gaza Strip. Today he had this statement here saying that the army actually does not have a strategy to resolve the battle against Hamas. He's saying that this whole campaign inside of Gaza, it's not leading to anything. He's been criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu since the beginning of the war, saying that this man is only following his own interests, his own career. He also came up with practical theories about, defeating Hamas, like Israel claims it wants to do inside of the Gaza Strip, and how it's impossible to completely eliminate Hamas. He's been saying that from the beginning. Therefore, him and people like him were saying, let's be satisfied with 50, 60, 70, 80%, get our people back, then continue to have another plan. But now he's actually talking about a different level. He's now saying they actually don't have a strategy to resolve the battle against Hamas. So they're fighting basically aimlessly. Now, that's been evident from a very long time ago, but Benjamin Netanyahu was trying to portray it in the minds of the people that, oh no, we're still fighting, there's still a lot of work to do, and the people inside of Gaza or the Palestinian resistance, so long as they're there, we're going to have to continue fighting them. And people like him, of course, Brik, are, many people in Israel listen to them at the end of the day, and their voices are becoming louder and louder inside of the Israeli society. However, Benjamin Netanyahu, he is still not really doing much to listen to these people. Benjamin Netanyahu is still continuing, and he is continuing his barbarism. So long as he's getting that support, so long as he is able to, and he will continue doing so as well. Which leads us to the most dangerous development that we had, which is the attack in Sana'a. There was an attack in Sana'a in a civilian quarter in Yemen, targeting innocent civilians. 9 were killed and 9 were wounded. These were some of the attacks that took place in Yemen, civilian locations. Some more explosions here, and that's followed. It's saying that no, they actually targeted bases for Ansarullah in Yemen. And Donald Trump, he had statements too. Donald Trump, after these attacks, he came up with multiple statements. He had a post online saying that Well, I ordered today the United States military to launch decisive and powerful military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. They have waged an unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, aircraft, and drones. Joe Biden's response was weak, pathetically weak, so the unrestrained Houthis just kept going. It has been over a year since the U.S. flagged commercial ships safely sailed through the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, or the Gulf of Aden. The last American warship to go through the Red Sea 4 months ago was attacked by the Houthis over a dozen times. Funded by Iran, the Houthi thugs have fired missiles at U.S. aircraft and targeted our troops and allies. These relentless assaults have cost the U.S. and world economy many billions of dollars, while at the same time putting innocent lives at risk. Well, you chose to take the path of the main country defending a genocidal entity and preventing a total legit embargo from being implemented against them. Instead of you taking action, you chose to be on the wrong side of history, as usual, the United States. The Houthi attack on American vessels will not be tolerated. We will use overwhelming lethal force until we have achieved our objective. The Houthis have choked off shipping in one of the most important waterways of the world, grinding vast swaths of global commerce to a halt and attacking the core principle of freedom of navigation upon which international trade and commerce depends. Now he's saying they're carrying out aerial attacks on bases, leaders, and missile defenses to protect American shipping. Well, so far only civilians have been killed. And he's telling them, to the Houthis, your time is up and your attacks must stop starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you have ever seen before. And then he's warning Iran too, saying that the support of the Houthis must end immediately. Do not threaten the American people, their president, who has received one of the largest mandates in presidential history. So Donald Trump is threatening. But the response came very quick from Ansarullah. Ansarullah, multiple officials from them, they said that Trump is weaker and lower than threatening the people of Yemen. Trump is a weak and low individual. And we will continue our operations in the Red Sea. And actually, we will escalate so long as Trump continues targeting us, and his ships and fighter jets will be targeted, and we will return one attack with two. We will return one hit with two hits, one blow with two blows. This is what we will do to them, according to Ansarullah. So from their perspective, well, they're not that worried. They're not that worried. And, well, they have proved that they are not worried because, well, they've had so many attacks being conducted against them by the genocide coalition, by the United States and by the UK and by Israel too. And in their statements today, they did mention the three names, the US, the UK, and Israel. They did not exclude Israel, which means that they're preparing. Of course, this attack is an escalation. The attack, well, there's a very high likelihood that Israel is applying pressure. Israel has been applying lots of pressure on the United States for the past couple of days. The Daniel Davis appointment as a deputy head of the spying in the United States taken away. Adam Bowler forced to resign. Many statements taken back. Clearly, there's an inner battle, and there are people who are very close to Donald Trump who are staunch zealots, Zionists, who are with him, trying to hinder any prospect of development, any sort of shifting, especially with Adam Bowler saying, like, we're not an agent of Israel. Of course, Israel would, have this pressure on the United States to start attacking Yemen. But from a Yemeni perspective, that's not really going to affect them. What is it going to do with them? It's actually going to make them even more keen, because Yemen, Well, they've never considered anything to be a loss when they got into the Battle of Al-Aqsa flood and started to have these attacks in the Red Sea, beginning with one phase and leading up to 5 phases. Eventually, before the ceasefire took place, they reached what they labeled as Phase 5, which included, in many cases, daily ballistic missiles on Israel, apart from the embargo that was constantly expanding. At one point, to reach the Mediterranean too. Then the drones targeting very sensitive security and military bases inside of Israel, and nothing fazed them. Israel attacked twice, very heavy attacks that were supposed to be a show, lots of fire coming out, oil, locations, but they still did not stop. They continued. The United States and the UK, aka the Genocide Coalition, they carried out many attacks against Yemen. That didn't stop them. But there are two things to understand from this attack of the United States. Firstly, well, the United States didn't give a lot of time to start attacking. So before the United States started taking action against Ansarullah beforehand, well, it took some time to try and gather a few countries. Initially, they wanted to form an international coalition. That proved to be a massive failure. And by the way, this coalition was supposed to be formed of at least 9 countries, if you remember. But some of these countries only sent like an observer, ended up with the most dedicated countries for Israel, Britain and the United States of America, leading this genocide coalition for the sake of a genocidal war criminal entity. And they failed because Ansarullah, well, they ended up expelling 4 U.S. aircraft carriers. They attacked ships, they attacked destroyers, they targeted over a dozen, they took down over a dozen of the MQ-9s of the United States, worth hundreds of millions, targeted some of their fighter jets too. And despite every attack that came out against them, nothing stopped them. And with their statements, by the way, if you read out some of the statements that are coming from Yemen, they are not really taken aback by anything. They don't have any sort of worry. Financial leverage was a thing that the United States tried to implement against them. At one point, like what the reports from Yemen said, through Saudi Arabia, with some embargoes, then Yemen started to have certain warnings showing that, well, we can start to carry out attacks against Saudi Arabia too. You knew what we attacked before. Then they continue until the last second. This attack coming from the United States now is most likely going to speed up the process of Yemen escalating, by the way, and potentially starting to have direct attacks inside of Israel. Because from their perspective, they know how things work. They're not really looking at the United States attack on Yemen from a U.S. perspective only. No, they know that the United States is doing this on behalf of Israel, at the request of Israel, for the sake of Israel. No more than that. So that could actually lead to a case where Yemen is starting to actually target Israel directly. Now that there are more breaches as well coming from Israel, they can argue that Israel broke the ceasefire and that they're actually killing civilians again. They can argue that the genocide is continuing inside of Gaza, because one of their considerations before to restrict the attacks in the Red Sea would have been that Israel is having a blockade on Gaza and not allowing any aid in. So Yemen could argue, well, okay, we'll have a blockade on you. Now, well, 19 people in 48 hours, they can target Israel easily and say, well, okay, well, you're still massacring people, so no law, no more. That's it. We're attacking you. And the main eyes with the attack on Yemen and the main threat with the attack on Yemen is going to Iran. That's why both Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, they mentioned Iran. They warned Iran from attacking Yemen, although Iran clarified previously many times that the movements that they support, they have their own independence. It's not as if, Iran clicks a button, all of a sudden everyone is listening. No, they have their independence. They have their own operations, like what the Palestinian resistance did. And the immediate participation, for example, from the Lebanese resistance on the 8th of October. Likewise, later on with Yemen. Time proved that, Iran, it's known that they have leverage to an extent, but it proved that they have a lot of leverage on any actions coming from Iraq, and they do have a very high leverage on Hezbollah, despite the argument, internally from Hezbollah about the level of effect coming from Iran. However, when we talk about Hezbollah in Lebanon, they religiously follow the supreme leader in Iran. It's part of their faith, the supreme leader of Iran. So there was a bit of leverage there. But with Yemen, it's as if Yemen is completely at liberty of doing anything they want. I mean, some people argued that, of course, that, we have no direct evidence of that was an argument and an analysis that was put out there by some, that Iran did try and apply some sort of leverage with Yemen, try and say, okay, well, we're going to reach an agreement at one point, maybe we try and decrease the level of attacks. If these, again, reports were accurate, I'm not saying that they were, and that also hasn't worked. From the tone that's coming from them, it appears that Yemen, they have a very large level of independence, very big level of independence, and their attacks might well escalate very soon in Israel. And this is something that can potentially increase to other escalations, by the way, because the Yemeni attacks on Israel, they were very serious. And Israel took them very, very seriously. That's why they carried out 2 very high-risk attacks and long-distance attacks against Yemen, over approximately 2,000 kilometers in Israel. After they conducted these attacks, they said, we were very thankful that we returned all of our fighter jets. So they were expecting that they might have some sort of an attack when they went to Yemen. So very tense, very, very tense days. From the ceasefire perspective, no breakthrough so far to go into phase 2. The latest developments are, the United States is still applying pressure or trying to apply pressure on Hamas, saying that, oh no, this agreement that or this proposal that you're coming up with, this response is not really suitable. We need you to have, to accept the actual proposal that we had. But of course, Hamas are not doing that. And many of the Palestinian resistance movements, at least 5 of them, they had statements, by the way, to support Yemen, because they appreciate that Yemen is being attacked for their position standing up for Gaza. So they supported them heavily. And from a Yemeni perspective, they will not be de-escalating or reducing their attacks after this U.S. attack. Very tense days ahead, ladies and gentlemen. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you. I'll open the space up for the community. Welcome, everyone, to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. And we'll go to the beginning, try and go to the beginning of the chat, see if we have anything. If you wouldn't mind, if you have any questions for me, just to highlight them, just so that we of the questions, or try and reach as much as possible. How will Stephen Kelly, the Houthis, retaliate? Now, I believe that they will increase their attacks on the... Trump said he carried out the attack from the aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman. So I believe that they will target that, number one. So they will focus on having like maybe a dozen drones, maybe, or cruise missiles, trying to target the US aircraft carrier. And I also believe that they might be sending something towards Israel this time, because this embargo is just showing, financial problems for Israel, but there are no sirens in Israel. So I believe that they will look to activate the sirens in central Israel at some point soon. It's coming at a very tense moment, especially with all of the tensions across the Levant, and the United States trying to have something with Iran. Iran saying that no, it's not worth it to talk with them. Coming at a very tense situation. And thank you. That was from Stephen Kelly. Let's go to your next one. Jimmy saying, if we are attacking them, then it proves the blockade has been effective at stopping the Zyphrex. Yes, absolutely. It has been exceptionally effective, by the way. And the reason that the reason that some people wouldn't necessarily say that is to downplay the level of impact that Ansarullah made against Israel. Part of the, psychological warfare game, to downplay what your enemies do. The campaign of Ansarullah has been exceptionally effective. And that's why we spoke about so much from the beginning to now about the actions of the Palestinian resistance, because, mainstream media and online, it's as if nothing is happening. You read some media outlets, nothing. It's as if there are no attacks, for example, from the Palestinian resistance against Israel, even the most blatant attacks inside of Israeli territories, apart from when they were getting a beating inside of Gaza and in the small areas that they initially occupied and invaded slightly in Lebanon, hardly anyone was saying anything. But like you said, the fact that, the United States is moving its aircraft carriers, not just moving its aircraft carriers, for the first time in many, many years, removing an aircraft carrier from the South China Sea. And not as if they're supposed to be there, but 4 of them. And all 4 were attacked and forced, 3 were forced to completely get out, gone back to maintenance in San Diego and other parts of the U.S. And Harry S. Truman was like in the most northern part of the Red Sea, by the way, fleeing as far as possible. But like Trump said, they're still functional, clearly now. They probably didn't have the impact of, for example, Eisenhower and Lincoln beforehand. But I do think that Ansarullah now will be actually raising the bar with the aircraft carriers that are conducting attacks against them. And they're not going to stop. And also you said, Stephen, do you think Iran will use the Gaza drones on the Zai ships? I don't think Iran will directly be participating now. Iran, you need to realize, when did they conduct their attacks, for example, on Israel? Beforehand, there was an attack that they considered to be an attack on their sovereign territory, the embassy/consulate in Syria at the time. They considered to be an attack on Iran, and they directly attacked Israel. And the second one was again an attack in Iran. An assassination of the Hamas leader in Iran, and of course other attacks like the assassination of the Secretary General of Hezbollah and the IRGC senior figure who was with him, Abbas Nil Forushan. But of course, during that attack in True Promise 2, they said it was also for the attacks on the children of Gaza as a retaliation to that. However, in all of the Iranian attacks, there was an attack on Iran. But now there is an outstanding response. So, that's something that can happen. But I don't think Iran would choose something not that symbolic. They want something symbolic. Iran focused a lot on making a scene when they attacked Israel, hundreds of first attack, the biggest drone attack in history, they said at the time, as in one go. Second attack, 200 hypersonic and ballistic missiles landing on terror bases inside of Israel. They created a show. It was a show, Iran. So I don't think they will be satisfied with just like a drone or something. I think if Iran want to attack, they will be giving Israel a very big slap, if not a very, very heavy punch too, that will shake them, that will rock them. Not like, just a small drone thing. No. But I still believe that Iran will take their time. I don't think they are in a rush. I think they will potentially have this attack if something really, really serious happens. Because, well, if we look at the previous attacks of Iran, they came after very, very ugly periods. I mean, in many cases, some people are saying, like, where are you now? Do you know what I mean? Where is anyone? Like in the early days when there was an attack on Al-Mahmadan hospital and daily massacres taking the lives of 600, 700, 800 people a day inside of Gaza. People are saying, where's everyone? No, not just, Iran, everyone, where are you? So we need to understand that these days passed without an Iranian response at the time, but it did come after, and not to say that there wasn't a contribution, it was a contribution, of course, but it did eventually come after what Iran considered to be an attack on its territories. And Cookie, though, thank you so much for your super, much appreciated. And let's go see if I have anything else from the top. And also Jimmy is asking about the Houthis, saying it looks like Trump just ordered more attacks on Yemen as usual. So now we will likely see Houthis return fire. Yes. Do you believe they will hit Israel if they help? Yeah, I think that might be the case, but I think they will prioritize targeting the aircraft carrier because the attacks were conducted from that aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier would be the place where the fighter jets most likely are going to Yemen to launch the attack. So they will have a very high priority on giving them a blow. But then I also believe that now Yemen can argue that the time has come for them at some point to attack Israel too, because, well, Israel is increasing the massacres inside of Gaza. 19 martyrs in 24 hours, 48 hours, excuse me. It's very serious. And Stephen is also saying, will Hezbollah start to get involved if there's on the Zay's U.S. and Israel? I think, look, eventually, so long as Israel in its current form, to be very specific, exists with all of the downsides, and there are no, there are no real positive sides, but let's say, to be very specific, I think there will always be tension to have this escalation, especially with them occupying 5 points in Lebanon, and Hezbollah spent most of their lives fighting Israeli occupation. They were established to fight Israeli occupation. They were established during an Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Their whole heritage is established on expelling Israel. And at the end of the day, if there won't be any solutions diplomatically, and they're not hopeful that there will be any diplomatic solutions, judging by the talks that are taking place between the Lebanese government and the mediators, but they will eventually start attacking. Look, there's going to reach a stage where if no solution is being, they will be attacking. Likewise in Syria, by the way, it will be inevitable to start something, right? So they're probably giving it more time now. Well, both of them are in Lebanon and in Syria to try and see if something can happen. I mean, in Lebanon, there were talks about the a new type of form, right, of resistance, for example. But then again, we haven't seen anything being established. The state wants to have like full statehood. The Palestinian president, he made a visit to Lebanon, in case you don't know, and his attempt was apparently, according to some reports, is to disarm the Palestinian movements inside of Lebanon. Now, although there were reports that all of the movements were disarmed in Syria, for example, beforehand, that wasn't the case. And Israel conducted multiple attacks against Palestinian resistance bases inside of Syria in the past couple of months, some of whom were also blamed for transferring weapons to Lebanon. But in Lebanon, the Palestinian president went there not to kind of try and do anything, but he says, no, the refugee camps, we need to get rid of the weapons. And you need to understand here, the weapons that some of the Palestinian armed groups in Lebanon have, they were operated against Israel in the past year and a half, by the way. There were many attacks coming from Al-Qassam brigades in Lebanon. Of course, there's another argument. Well, was it in full coordination with Hezbollah? Did Hezbollah just, say that they did it? No. The type of attacks and the actual weapon used, it was different. Of course, in coordination with Hezbollah, but the weapons of the Palestinians in Lebanon, well, the main big armed groups in Lebanon, they were landing on Israel. So the Palestinian president is going there now, trying to kind of have these talks to disarm them, what have you. And again, all of these talks are coming without real, progress on the ground. I mean, if the Palestinian Authority, for example, led by the West Bank Authority, managed to achieve like tangible results or, something good through their diplomatic and peaceful resistance, for example, one might argue then, well, okay, let's, stop, what they call the armed resistance, for example, because, we're seeing results from the peaceful diplomatic unarmed resistance. Although many people in the West Bank were joking about it, like some people, when they hear a statement of the Palestinian president, they would go to an Israeli checkpoint, and they're saying this is an example of peaceful resistance. They will call out and shout out to the Israeli soldiers on the checkpoint, saying, "Hey, leave!" And then they're not leaving; they're still there, and they'll shout for a few days, and it doesn't work. So unfortunately, that didn't really bring any results. But is the future bringing something that we haven't seen before? I highly doubt so. Unless there is a threat, there is a really big threat on Israel that they actually take seriously this time, because we need to consider the level of arrogance that they have, by the way. These people are exceptionally arrogant. And even with Iran, for example, they were so arrogant up until they got that blow, and then they started to shiver, right? We'll see how things go. I mean, eventually, if no progress is made on the ground, I think it will eventually lead to another escalation. And the Trump administration, clearly that lobby is still very, very strong. They're managing to take people out. They're managing people to retract certain statements, forcing the administration to do certain attacks. Doesn't look like, Trump is actually just working from an American basis. You know what I mean? And Torrio also said, as soon as there's no physical force, they will keep attacking. This is what they have shown, really. I mean, this is what they have shown in Egypt. This is what they've shown in Palestine. This is what they've shown in Lebanon historically. Is there something that we don't know that can happen? I doubt so. I mean, it would be great. Listen, it would be amazing, super amazing, if things can be resolved diplomatically, and sacrifices from here, sacrifices from there, and all of a sudden there's amazing, no bloodshed, no problems. But throughout Israel's history, it's not the case. And I think, unfortunately, some people are still delusional about the reality of the formation and the reasons behind the formation of Israel as a state. It's not there to have a peaceful solution. It's there to be a problem and cause more problems. Ibn Lahad, I know you don't support the two-state solution. No, I personally don't. But can Palestinians live with monsters who called human animals? I mean, I think if there would be a case, if Israel as an apartheid supremacist entity is dismantled and there would be equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea, I think people who have really big problems will potentially leave. And I think those who will remain to stay, well, many of them will cope with the new reality because that's it. It's done. The era of supremacy and arrogance is over, and they don't have the power to impose it on others, so they'll have to deal with it. And many parts of the population will just go on with their lives, by the way. Because it doesn't matter how things are portrayed at the end of the day. I think people share very similar things that they want in their livelihood, right? Like regardless of ideology, safety, financial security, education, healthcare, all of that stuff. And don't forget, it will be, it won't be difficult for both sides, right? Like from some of the Israeli perspective, they're going to think, oh, I'm going to have to live with these people who also killed some of my people, because don't forget the brainwashing, right? Some of them actually don't believe that they've done anything wrong. They believe that they've been righteous all the way along, and the aggressive Palestinians were just attacking them because they are such a wonderful democracy. And the Palestinians, they don't like democracy and advancement and enlightenment, therefore they start to attack it. So it's possible. It is possible at the end of the day. And also what people need to understand is that if you have, like, for example, a one-state solution with equal rights, which is the ideal solution, I'm not sure why not many people called for it. Well, at least in the mainstream. That will not stop people from being racist. You're not going to end racism, or end supremacy, or end religious radicalism, for example. It's not going to end. These things, they take time, and they will still remain there. But the most important thing is having this system that protects everyone, regardless, and criminalizes actions based on, for example, religious or racial hatred. And then, everyone, but because if you have a system, everyone is forced to abide by it. That's law. But now you have a law that protects Group A and Group B, subhumans. And there's grades like B, C, D. And Eileen is saying, why did not the Iranians a threat to close the Straits of Hormuz? They would not have to close them for a week to prove their point. Well, I mean, they made hints. It's a known fact that they can close the Strait of Hormuz. It's a known fact that they can close the whole area described as the Middle East or West Asia if they want. Everyone knows that. The fact that a group supported by Iran can close the Red Sea is witness to the Iranian capability, because these people are using Iranian technology and they're supported by Iran. So from the bigger players, they're seeing that, well, if this group that Iran supports can do that, then what can Iran do? Right? So everyone knows that. Everyone knows the Iranian leverage. But again, I think, Iran in its nature, it's not as if they actually want these massive wars. And don't forget, Iran, even with the early days of what they call the Islamic Revolution of Iran, 1979, Iran had a concept. Well, some in the establishment of Iran, they had a concept of exporting the revolution. That concept still strong. It's still strong in some aspects, with people from the establishment, but the power of that sentiment is not as strong as before, because there are more internal criticisms in Iran about this involvement, right? Although the other argument that they have, the people who support more Iranian influence, is for them to, well, have more problems towards their enemies, so that their enemies are not closer to them. And they can argue that this strategy has worked. If you look at it from a bigger picture, by the way, it's Iran that has more leverage against Israel, because Iran support Hezbollah, they support the Palestinian resistance, they support, you know, armed groups surrounding Israel, and they use that as leverage against Israel and the United States. And they use it as leverage when they negotiate with the United States too. So they would try and take a step back up until really the last second. Up until really the last second. And thank you so much for that. And again, yes, thank you for Cookie Dough and Jerry and Glenn and Alan as well. Thank you so much for your support. The U.S. cannot do diplomacy without a stick. They are ignorant and will not succeed. No, and I think part of the reason is the fact that the United States, when they even talk about crucial things to do with the international scene, they speak with themselves. They don't speak with other countries. A few people, in many cases, well, not that educated and not that well cultured, to be honest with you, and quite thick, quite ignorant, making decisions. Combine that with the power of money that the lobbies have, who support them and put them out there in the front. Combine that with the power of the military-industrial complex, and it's a disastrous recipe. And then you have the heritage, you know, of the United States post-World War II and the New World Order, that, by the way, looked very different than what we think now. Even the United States at that time, they thought that that's it. The era has come of the United States doing anything it wants, and no one will ever threaten them in the future. But that has changed, and we can see that changing now. And that's despite criticism. And unfortunately, the administration, instead of taking this criticism on board and working on it, no, they go against it. And they have the audacity to criticize what they label as repressive regimes across the world, who actually take way more advice from their citizens than the United States does from its citizens, or other many Western countries to that regard, by the way. And that's a problem. That's a problem. And the biggest part of that problem is the fact that you have so much money being involved into politics and buying the people in power. People have the money to control the media. They have the money to buy and blackmail the politicians, interest rings, and that's very problematic. Laws that actually allow them to get away with all of that. And Suppi, can you please highlight the Druze wanting to join Israel? Well, I think number one, we shouldn't say, thank you so much, that's from Suppi. I think number one, we shouldn't really say the Druze wanting to join Israel. And I believe you're referencing to the Druze of Syria. The Druze, I mean, for those of you who don't know the Druze as a community, they have a history and they have roots within Ismaili Shia Islam, origins from Egypt. They had a very large presence in the Levant, and they moved between Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine, and Jordan as well. The communities across the world, some, but the majority of them, the biggest populations in Syria, then Lebanon, then Palestine or Israel, and they were moving all across. So they are not. So let's understand the roots. Okay, the roots are Islam. In different countries, by the way, they describe themselves differently. For example, the majority of the Druze inside of Israel, bar the Golan Heights, you wouldn't necessarily hear them say they're Muslim. They'll say they're Druze as a religion. Whereas it's different in Syria. In Syria, they will tell you we're Muslim Druze and muwahidun, as in, we are monotheists. In Lebanon, there was also a debate. One of the main figures in leading the Druze politically, like Walid Jumblat, the son of Kamal Jumblat, he also said, we need to go back to our roots, which is Islam. That's just an elaboration about their religious and sect background. And so there's a debate, basically. With regards to their nationality and positions, I think to a very large extent, the position of the religious leaders after the occupation of Palestine inside of Israeli territories, their position in siding with the state of Israel, bar the Golan, has damaged the reputation of the community as a whole, unfortunately. But again, I don't think we should be conclusive, because that's not really the case. Because there are internal differences. Some Druze inside of Israel describe as Palestinian, like the majority of the Palestinian minority inside of modern-day Israel or occupied 1948 Palestine. The Druze in the Golan Heights, the 90% of them refuse Israeli citizenship. In Lebanon and in Syria, you have multiple approaches nowadays. Now, if we go to Syria, lots of talk about Syria because a couple of hundred of them went to visit this, religious place inside of next to Tiberias, Prophet Shu'aib, they call him. But of course, this was coordinated by Israel, and Israel wants to do that before they start bringing people to work. Now, we need to put that into perspective. Number one, this wasn't endorsed by any, although they have differences between them as well, by any of the three main religious scholars or religious backgrounds, right? Leaders inside of Syria who are called, most of them are in Suwaida, by the way. No one was from Suwaida went to Israel, who are Yusuf al-Jarbu', Hamoud al-Hinnawi, and Hikmat al-Hajari. None of them endorsed that. And most of them who went to Israel went from an area in Syria called Al-Khadr, which is close to the Israeli occupied Golan Heights. Now, internally, as a matter of fact, the majority of the Druze community inside of Syria, they actually refuse that. And they've had meetings with the new government. And they're recruiting for the army in Suwaida already. Armed groups who fought against Bashar al-Assad. Some of them were the first to go and take down the Assad government, by the way, when they went to Damascus. Let's not forget that. With what was called HTS at the time. Okay. Now, the three religious figures inside of Syria, because the main thing is between Syria and Israel, because there's a division in Lebanon, by the way, between, two of the main political leaders, although the religious leaders are also not endorsing any of that. But the two political leaders in Lebanon, one of them is called Walid Jumblat and the other one is called Wahab Wahab. Wahab Wahab is viewed as a person who is more pro having this peace process with Israel, and he considers the main religious figure inside of Israel for the Druze community, Muwaffaq Tarif, to be a credible religious figure, whereas Jumblat considers him to be representing the Druze community. Likewise in Syria, so they have a title. The religious figure of the Druze, they have a title. They called Sheikh al-Aql in Arabic, right? For a sheikh, like, a cleric, it also means an elder person. Aql, brain, or, they mean it by wisdom. There are three of them. And throughout this period, although they tried to hide it, it's been clear that there are differences between them. Al-Jarboua and Al-Hinnawi are more pro the government, the new government in Syria, and talking with them. So some of the Al-Jarboua, for example, will say, okay, we had doubts about them, especially with the background. We had fears because of some of their roots. But after Bashar fell, we started to see their approach. They approached us many times and we're dealing with them and it's fine, it's great, and we're Syrian. The problematic figure is called Al-Hajri. Al-Hajri, he always comes up with statements that are against the government, and he's not really pushing any alternative. And when he's asked about Israel, he will kind of on the sly say, you know, we don't need anyone, but we will do what's appropriate for us as a sect. So prioritizing the sect over the nationality. He actually tried to have a really big protest of support, of solidarity with him today. He was expecting to get about 100,000 people supporting him. Unfortunately for him, it got about 300 people, showing that his line has less popularity. The line that isn't, well, clear, more clear in addressing the main problem, right, which is Israel and what are the relations are in a unified Syria. Of course, he still did not endorse this visit. He still did not endorse his visit. But what's actually happening now is we're starting to see more of that, well, inner difference inside of the Druze community about this. And that's something good and healthy, because I think some people want to rush into, you know, causing sectarian tensions. They're very quick to ride on any sort of sectarian problem so that, you know, they can hopefully support the enemies of Syria and divide it and cause problems with it. But what's happening now within the Druze community inside of Syria, as a whole too, is showing that there is a level of dynamics. And what people need to understand also about the Druze community, and of course they've had big roles in fighting against French colonialism and fighting oppressors previously, by the way, so that no one can actually say, especially the ones in Syria. So no one can say that these people are like, you know, some people try and portray the whole community as traitors. Dangerous and unsubstantiated talk. But what's happening is very, very dynamic. It's showing inner differences. And it's showing that not all of them are one. And one other thing that people need to understand is it's also highlighting the role of the religious authority in the Druze community. Although many people would not necessarily describe themselves as religious in the Druze community, the role of the religious institution and the religious establishment within the Druze community is very powerful, is extremely powerful, to a level where sometimes people give it, like, think that it's even more powerful than what it is. It's very powerful, but there are still people who are not really actually supportive of it. For example, with this figure, Al-Hajri, for example, who's criticizing the government in Syria, he's saying like almost we want a secular state. So you have a religious figure talking about secularism and interfering in politics, right? It's not making a lot of sense. And that's why I'm saying that there's an inner argument within the Druze community, but they are trying as much as possible to show that there are no splits internally. They are describing it as just a difference in opinion. Although several recordings that came out between different parties, especially armed groups in the As-Suwaida province, show that no, there were actually almost bloody wars between them. Like, for example, part of the armed group that actually is siding now with the Syrian government, who used to fight Bashar al-Assad before, and who were the first to go to Damascus. They're led by a guy called Layth al-Bal'ous. His father was killed by al-Assad before. And they were also fighting armed groups that Iran supported, by the way, inside of Syria, whom many criticized. He now, well, there was a recording of one of his guys speaking with one of Al-Hajri's guys, and they have Al-Bal'ousi has a group called the Men of Dignity, and there's another armed group called the Free People of the Mountain, because they usually live on mountains. He actually, well, that conversation showed that these people were, he's saying, we're going to bring government vehicles here. It's going to be run by our community, but we're coordinating with the government. You know, we want to activate the municipality, the services, security, whatever. And that other side told him, then there will be bloodshed and it'll be on you. So there's a lot of dynamics. And now, by the way, it's a de facto thing. Now, for example, these people outright saying no way, because some people tried to raise an Israeli flag in the Suwayda province. Other people came and burnt it down. You know, Israel's trying to do stuff. The friction in an area called Jaramana and close to Damascus was quickly dealt with by the administration. And now it's a de facto thing. That's it. There are people inside the Suwayda. There is a recruiting office led by Al-Bal'ous, who was actually fighting the previous government, and other groups as well. So it's showing that there's a big difference. And from what I'm viewing, actually, with the Druze community, is that, like all of the minorities inside of Syria, no, they are supportive of having a united Syria and are against Israel. People need to understand that, whether we're talking about the Druze or Alawite community or the Christian community. But with the Druze in particular, because they are the main target of Israel, by the way, they are, the eyes are on them to a very large extent. And Israel was taken aback by the agreement that the government in Syria had, following the agreement that they had with SDF, well, which is the main movement controlling northeast Syria. The day after, they had an agreement with the Druze community in Suwayda. Of course, some of them were objecting that, but Israel was saying it's a huge blow to us, a huge blow to their campaign to infiltrate under the excuse of protecting minorities. Ho, ho, ho. Israel slaughtering minorities since its inception, claiming that they want to defend other minorities, trying to leverage with the relationship that they have with the religious figures inside of Israel. So you clearly have differences. And the differences, by the way, are between people of equal weight as a religious authority. They have the same title religiously. So I hope that clarifies. I mean, I had to dig into the background slightly so you can understand. But again, from what I'm viewing, by the way, I believe from the statements, from the sentiment in the streets, from the developments, that no, actually the majority are against that. And many actually rejected this move that some of them did by visiting Israel, although they were from very limited areas next to Israel. And thank you for that. Let's go to Stephen Kelly saying again, the Zionist weapons must be so low, the resistance must be able to defeat them easily. I think they still have weapons. I think, they have exhausted a lot of their weapons, but they still have weapons. Israel still have Air Force. They're still a country with a lot of power, especially with the attacks that they're conducting with the support from the United States. Garfi Mahmoud, do you think about people like Omar Baloch who say Hamas act on the October 7th was irresponsible and they should have waited until they could handle the predictable response? I think that, number one, nothing was predictable for the people of Gaza. Their whole life is uncertainty. They were living in a besieged place. You're talking about 73% of the population before the 7th of October, they were refugees. Anyone under the age of 17 on October the 7th, 2023 saw nothing but Gaza. Over 50% unemployment. Most of the homes in Gaza are uninhabitable. Many people with lost families, injuries. Most children are with trauma and catastrophical situation. No hope for the future, no vision, no vision from their perspective, no vision given to them for a solution, and an oppressive, barbaric country imposing a blockade on them and attacking them whenever they want under any pretext, as in when they create it. So, number one, no one is entitled to tell the people who are oppressed how to act. This is what I firmly believe. I am not entitled to tell the people of Gaza how they should and shouldn't act because I did not go through what they went through. And what they went through, if anyone on earth faces 0.1% of it, they will probably do way bigger things than what Hamas did on October the 7th. They will tell you they were mild on October the 7th. So that's just to be very clear. Secondly, they couldn't have really predicted what Israel would do. You know, the argument that, well, look what it brought to Gaza. Look what it brought to Gaza. Yeah, of course, there's a lot of destruction in Gaza. However, there is a much bigger prospect for Gaza and for the Palestinian cause as a whole and for the planet to get rid of this evil that has been sitting there, hiding, working in the dark, and trying to hide itself with its other supporters too. It exposed everyone, didn't it? So I don't think anyone on earth is entitled to tell the people of Gaza or the Palestinian resistance how to act and when to act. If you haven't faced what they faced, you can't talk. All we can say is, look at the history. Look at the history. And these people have been expelled multiple times previously. And also from a strategic perspective, they didn't want to be the ones waiting for an attack coming against them. They wanted to use an element of surprise. That's the argument that they used. Israel potentially having prior knowledge, Israel capitalizing, Israel committing a genocide, Israel could commit all of that under any excuse that they want and get away with it. And they have gone away with it. Before, they're getting away with genocide. They're getting away with being convicted by the ICC and ICJ as war criminal terrorists who are committing a genocide. And they're being protected by the countries who call themselves the beacons of democracy and human rights, whether in the United States and Europe. They're getting away with it. So I wholeheartedly disagree with anyone who criticizes the legitimate Palestinian resistance. And I hope that clarifies. Think before you type is saying, isn't it ironic that the rapid decline of America in the last 20 years correlates with the US government fully supporting Israel no matter what? If they support Palestinians, they would have been blessed. Yeah, but unfortunately, you know, no one fancies supporting the weak that much. And we know how strong the Israeli lobby is in the United States. Saying that, though, I think things have changed. Things have changed with the American population as a whole. Things have changed with the main target of Zionism, which is the Jewish population abroad, too, apart from the Jewish population inside of Israel. Things are changing heavily. And I think it's going towards a dead end for Israel, isn't it? I mean, they're buying time now. And the time that they're buying now is not necessarily going to be too long, to be fair. And thank you so much for that, my friend. Let's just take maybe one or two more. Jimmy is saying also, most of us have a gut feeling of more war ahead instead of peace. Your thoughts? I mean, my thoughts really are that if the United States administration, despite the pressure from the lobby, will still push for more ceasefire, then we could see a de-escalation. There is a very high chance that everything would fall apart, but there's a very high chance that it would not. Whether or we are expecting something in the future, because the problem is still there. And we're not dealing with the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is the apartheid, racist, supremacist regime inside of Israel. That is the problem. The inequality. That is the problem. If you resolve it by simply having equality between the Jordan River to the sea, then we can say, hopefully, we're not going to see any more wars in the future. Yeah, there will be some attempts from remnants of supremacists who want to still impose their will and fantasies by force on other people, but they will be too weak at the time, and they will be taken down fairly quickly if they dare. Although there's a very high chance that they would be, cowards, like the cowards they are, even when they have the power. So I think, like I said from the beginning, either a very tense de-escalation until a new war emerges again, or a continuation up until everything blows out, and then we will have another solution. And thank you so much for that. Then we have Glenn asked me how do I remember the names. It's because when you're actually in the process, when you're constantly reading up about them, you will remember all of them. Hey, don't think I'm doing this 24/7. What do you think? I'm sitting there before the live stream? No, you constantly do research. Stephen's saying Sky News Israel resume the ceasefire talks. Israel did not deny that they stopped the talks, by the way. No one said that they stopped the talks. The only side that they said stopped the talks, by the way, was Hamas a couple of weeks ago, when there was actually no prospect of having anything. So from their perspective, they were like, I'm not going to go ahead. We're going to continue up until they adhere to the ceasefire agreement. If they don't adhere to the ceasefire agreement, we're not going to go ahead. And that's why the United States, they started to have direct talks with them. They had direct talks with them because they realized, well, the Israeli side, they're not actually providing anything, and we need to have talks with them. Only for Benjamin Netanyahu and Ron Dermer to have this crazy campaign, according to the U.S. official who we spoke about yesterday, and go and try and take all of them down. And guess what? We're seeing it happen. Adam Bowler is out. Daniel Davis is out before he actually got in. They leaked the talks that were happening between the United States and Hamas. And they went mad after Adam Bowler was saying they're actually nice guys. So, do you know what I mean? But then, no one after that talks resumed between Hamas and the United States directly, no one said that we're out of the negotiations. No one said that. So they're talking. They're talking. And I mean, like yesterday, I said, I think, the United States still doing the same thing with Israel. Like, we'll try and use leverage, increasing the massacres, still keeping the pressure on the population, using war crimes as means or as tools for political means, not knowing that these people already faced all of that in the past 16 months. And listen, we can all of a sudden have a breakthrough. We can all of a sudden have a breakthrough. But so long as you have, well, Israel and Netanyahu on one side and an administration with a very high level of understanding and compliance with him, regardless of any other moves that might be interpreted as, otherwise in a different manner, there's still a very big risk. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you for your valuable contributions and questions as well. I enjoyed taking them. Thanks for everyone who supported with the super, Khaled, Alan, Glenn, Sailor, Cookie, and everyone else. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I will hopefully see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Take care.